Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our second episode of season 17, a very special guest and certified sex and porn addiction coach, as well as the CEO of Elevated Recovery, J.K Emezi. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. JK, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Dan. I appreciate it. Excited that we were able to set this up despite the hurricane at this time of the year on your end. I'm J.K. Emezi. I am a sex and porn addiction recovery coach, and I've been helping men end their out of control behavior, their compulsive sexual behaviors, for 11 years. I like to say that I did it for about 5 years horribly and 6 years with excellence. In all in all transparency, I myself am a former porn addict. I'll be sharing a little bit of that story. But the bottom line with what I do is that I truly believe that every individual who works with us is the best expert at themselves. And my job as a coach is to help them step past many of the obstacles and limiting beliefs that hold them back, empower them to realize that they can actually end their behavior. The brain is plastic, and they're fully capable of rewiring it, and they don't need to be held back to their past.
Beautiful. Well, JK, thank you so much for being here today. And I think that your expertise and knowledge in that field will definitely be able to enlighten some of our listeners. I'm not sure exactly what is the percentage of them that are, have any type of addiction, especially to sex or porn. But I think that what information you can provide will definitely be of extreme amount of help. So again, thank you for being here today. So let's go back into the past and
Mm.
jump into a DeLorean time machine and try to understand the history, or how do people become addicted to sex or porn?
Okay, this is a great question. I think that we have to break it down into two separate things. There is pornography and there is sex. The main difference between pornography and sex is that that matters is that sex may contain an element of intimacy sometimes. However, pornography does not contain any intimacy. And this is important because the type of pornography that I would say 90% of the pornography out there, this is not a statistic, but those who watch pornography will understand what I mean, is high speed internet pornography, which simply means that at about pornography was something that back in the day you would was very difficult to access. It was very taboo. You would have to get in a train or a bus, go to the dark side of town across the tracks, buy the magazine, hide it under your coat, come back and hide it from the kids. And then you'd have to return it. It was a lot of work. In 2006, that was the advent of YouTube. And this was the moment that the pornography industry pivoted. This was where tube sites came about and pornography became free. It became very easy to access it. And that's when high speed internet pornography became a problem. This is where it goes to your question, Dr. Dan. A lot of people had a problem with pornography because they were using it to medicate unresolved issues or past trauma. Now, because of its easy availability and the fact that you could just pick up your phone and you could view pornography anonymously, we had a new set of individuals who are now addicted to it because they're using it to anesthetize strong emotions, stress, loneliness, and a lack of intimacy. So those are the main things that get people addicted to pornography. First of all, we would say unresolved issues, loneliness, lack of intimacy, stress, strong emotions.
Beautiful. So would you say that those who are addicted to porn are automatically addicted to intimacy, or vice versa, or they're not interconnected?
Did you say addicted to intimacy?
Well, addicted to sex. Okay, let's go.
Okay, okay. I was confused. I was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me
No, no.
addicted to
Being
sex.
addicted to pornography does not mean you are addicted to sex. Among my younger clients, many of them are all the way into their late 20s and have never had sex. They've never even had the opportunity because pornography has completely taken over that mechanism. Additionally, one of the things that pornography does is that it robs you of your ability to be intimate. It robs you of your self-esteem. You're constantly comparing yourself to others. And then biochemically, it does affect you. It does affect your nervous system, where you're not able to release adequate amounts of dopamine. The biggest impact it has on you, at least on our younger clients, is that it impacts your prefrontal cortex. So the more studies show that the more pornography you view, the less neural connections you have in your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex is in charge of executive function, prioritizing, and so on and so forth. So you're barely a functioning human being. You're struggling in high school, then you struggle in college, and I'll talk about my story in a moment, how I discovered like why I was so messed up. You're not able to date. You have access to pornography anyway, so why should you do that? You develop a sense of entitlement.
Okay.
I watch so much pornography. I see all these people, and in this world that I'm constantly exposed to, the guy just shows up and people are having sex. There's no explanation of how you court somebody, how seduction works, intersexual dynamics. None of that is broken down. So you go into the world confused on a date as to why sex doesn't happen. And even if you were about to have a sexual experience, you run the risk of several things happening. One of those is, I might be getting ahead of myself, what we call PIED, which is porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which simply means that you've conditioned your arousal system to only respond to digital stimuli. So
Okay.
a real life woman is not airbrushed. She's not perfect. She's not wearing makeup all the time. There are smells, there are sounds. She doesn't sound, she didn't practice the sound she's going to make. It is not scripted, but that's how the majority of your sexual experiences as a compulsive porn user have played out. So it becomes very difficult to have sex. When you put all of these things together, Dr. Dan, you find somebody who is not really having much sex or much satisfying sex. So they are two different things.
So do you think that just like anabolic steroids, you would say that the sexual desire in someone who watched too much porn will atrophy, just like someone taking anabolic steroids will have their testicles to atrophy because the production of testosterone is no longer present in their body because you're actually supplementing this with something chemical.
I've never heard that comparison before, but I love it, and that is true. That is such an apt a comparison. Yes, when you are spending a lot of time with pornography, you are conditioning your body to respond neurochemically in a completely different way than you're supposed to.
And this in itself, when it comes to creating, because I think, like you said, you basically answered a question that I was going to bring up later. But all this in terms of expectation or people creating some sort of delusional environment in their mind, and when they go out because they think that when porn they see two people get together, 2 seconds later he's inside her. Do you think that this is what people expect when they go on actual date? And if they don't get to that, they get disappointed, and that stops them from going into future dates.
Absolutely. Not only does it disappoint them, but for a lot of people, it brings up a lot of shame and guilt. See, they already are growing up conditioned to believe that viewing pornography is something bad or taboo. They're
Mhm.
hiding while they're doing it. They're doing it in isolation. Maybe they got caught when they were younger or got caught by their wife or whomever it may be. So there's a lot of shame attached to that, doing it over and over again. Now, when it's a compulsive behavior, you've been trying to stop this behavior despite its negative impact on your life, but you can't. So each time you tell yourself, I'm going to stop this behavior, and you are unable to, you then judge yourself. It goes from guilt, I did a bad thing, to shame, I'm a bad person. When such a person ends up going on a date and the date doesn't go well because they were expecting sex, it brings up, it dredges up those emotions of shame and guilt. They now attach the experience of dating and seeking intimacy with shame and guilt. But all of this is happening subconsciously. So they don't even know why they hate going on dates or why they are starting to become misogynistic. You see the problem there?
Right? It becomes a vicious cycle. So then, okay, so let's go right into the meat of it. Those who actually are following this pattern and this cycle that is becoming vicious, if they know they're doing something shameful or something that is based on a traumatic event in their past, how can they break away from that, JK? How can they say, you know what, I'm doing something shameful. Why continue doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results?
This is a great question. You know, there are a lot of people who feel, especially those who follow Western therapeutic modalities, which are very helpful to this. There are many people who feel that they need to go straight to the root cause, right? And for some issues, that is very helpful, especially if you're working with a skilled and competent practitioner to help you get there. But unfortunately, when it comes to something like pornography addiction, it is a behavioral or a process addiction. Unlike alcohol or other drugs, the drug for this is it's endogenous. It's within you. So you don't need to go out there and take it. The opiate is here. Dopamine is here. Norepinephrine is here. Adrenaline is here. Testosterone is created in your adrenals. So it's within you. And what happens with that is I just lost my train of thought because I'm so I'm like literally so excited to share it with you. What was the question again? Just
So
help me get back on track for a
so
second.
this become a vicious cycle. They know that they have a lot of shame in dealing with doing the same thing over and over again, but then they expect different result in terms of what should they do to be able to break that cycle.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So instead of going for the root cause, the first thing they need to work on is changing their behavior because it's a behavioral addiction before they get to that point. So the system that we teach here at Porn Reboot is very simple. It's just a three-pronged system. The first thing is you need to work on the most basic habits. What are the boundaries that you are crossing? What's the self-care that you're not implementing in your life? Um, um, what are some of the other behaviors, such as building intimacy with your partner, things that you're ignoring in your life? That would be the habits. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of coaching ends. They
Mhm.
help people change their habits, people feel a little bit better about themselves, and then they relapse months later. The second step is you have to make those habits a part of your lifestyle. And this is where you're doing it all the time. This is where you have accountability partners, people who are making sure it's a part of your life. You're controlling your environment a little bit better. When we talk about environment when it comes to pornography addiction, it's not just your physical environment, it's also what are you doing online? When are you getting stressed out during the day? How much time are you spending on social media? Is it throwing you off and is it triggering you? And this is where a lot of 12-step programs end because they put you into this lifestyle change and then they tell you it's once an addict, always an addict, or that you have to live with this for the rest of your life and you're always going to be recovering. There's nothing wrong with that. However, at Porn Reboot and for myself personally, I refuse to live that way. There is a final change, and that final change is your self image. You have to stop viewing yourself as a person who needs pornography as a coping mechanism. And this only happens when you've been living this way for a certain amount of time. When men have made this a part of their lifestyle, they are in a place psychologically where they can actually handle the root cause. If you sat down with a hypnotist or a psychotherapist and they brought up the original reason, okay, so the main reason that your arousal template was altered was because at a certain age you were um, molested, perhaps, or you got exposed to pornography very early. That's fine, but this is where you start changing your self image. Now you can handle it. The problem is, Dr. Dan, a lot of people go straight to the root cause and they're like, fine, I found the root cause. I know why I'm addicted to this.
Mhm.
And like, well, are you still relapsing? Yes. Why? Because you have no boundaries, you have no accountability, you have no alternative coping strategies. When you're angry, when you're stressed out, when you're burnt out, when you're overwhelmed, when you can't connect with your partner, what
Mhm.
are you doing? What are the tools you have? You don't have any of those things. right? And then finally, when it comes to the self-image part and the trauma part of that, it's really just finally realizing that it's not the trauma itself for a porn addict that's the problem if they have trauma. It is their refusal to accept the fact that the trauma happened. So we also find people who have found the root cause and they come and they're just, oh, the trauma, the trauma. I was like, bro, why are you still talking about the trauma? You spent a decade in psychotherapy,
Yes.
right? Have you, like, it happened? Have you accepted that? Well, I've accepted it, but like the impact it had on me, I was like, no, you haven't truly accepted it. The more you try to deny that it happened, the more it's going to hang around. You
Mhm.
have to fully accept that it happened. And this is one of the things that keeps people stuck in the self image stage. If you're listening to this and perhaps you've worked with a therapist and discovered the root cause of a sex or pornography addiction, and you still feel like you're holding on to the trauma, it's perhaps time to start asking yourself, is this something that I'm not accepting? And a great therapeutic method would be something like Albert Ellis's rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is wonderful for that if you're stuck.
And also hypnotherapy does help a lot. That I've seen this to be, and DBT, which is dialectical behavior psychotherapy,
Yes.
that helps also with certain kind of addiction. So when it comes to your own personal story,
Mm.
Jake, when did you realize that you were pushing the both side of the candle at this point? When did you say that, oh boy, this is really an addiction and this is not just a weekend warrior, kind of just like looking at for a couple minutes and then going on your way? So when did you,
Yeah.
I need help?
Like most people who struggle with an addictive behavior, we have several points where we tell ourselves that we need help. And I'm sure you've had clients like that. They show up, they tell you it's their rock bottom moment, and then suddenly when they get a little bit of relief, they disappear.
Yes, exactly. Very common.
There is one particular moment that stands out to me. I was exposed to pornography at the age of 8. And this was from a nanny who was taking care of us in our home. My parents were both medical professionals and were out working. And she had a comic book. Still love comic books. And I had to read this comic book. So I found it under her bed, and it was a pornographic magazine. And I knew it was something that I wasn't supposed to see,
Okay.
but there was this adrenaline rush because I knew my parents would whoop me if they found if they found out. So what happened was, even though I couldn't get aroused at the age of 8, it could change my state. And I liked that feeling of excitement, of being naughty, of I'm not supposed to see this, but I'm smarter than everyone. And every time I experienced a strong emotion, I would seek nudity. I would look for nudity to change my state as a child. Didn't realize this till I hit puberty. And then I learned about orgasm and masturbation. And I was like, it's even better. There's something amazing, this spiritual experience. And so now it became my coping strategy for everything, like having your heart broken, having acne, not feeling attractive when you're a teenager, the girl doesn't like you, I don't like myself. So I use porn for everything, all the way up through the age of about 22 years old. And I was in college, and this is where it escalated. I couldn't get a date. I was very awkward, always isolated, really hated myself, and I just couldn't stop using pornography. At this point, I was combining pornography with alcohol. I would drink, I would go out to bars and clubs. I would try to talk to women because I couldn't be anything else when I was sober. And then when it didn't work out, I would stumble back home. I would get on the chat sites back then with girls. And I would swipe my card till the chat site would say, "Hey, you've spent too much tonight." They had like an anti-gambling thing. Don't
Yes.
do it anymore. And then after that, I would go to places like Craigslist and start seeking anonymous encounters. And it was on one of these occasions that I was catfished, as they called it. I went out to see a young lady who was apparently babysitting somewhere, and she wasn't babysitting. Actually, it's a group of people. I don't know what they wanted to do to me, but I was in my vehicle, and the only thing that saved me was that I didn't put the vehicle in park. It was still in drive. So when they broke my window, and this was at like 2 a.m., I just put my foot on the accelerator as a reflex. I shot across that person's backyard, through the pool, the toys, everything, went to the other side of the road, screeched out, and I started driving home. And I remember driving home, my hands just gripping the steering wheel. And I kept saying, JK, you were not raised like this. You were not raised like this. You were not raised like this. You were not raised like this, with the glass all over me. I went right back home. That's when I realized, you know what? This is it. You could have died tonight. You could have gone to jail tonight. Bro, you are drunk. You
Oh,
have all this crap on your computer history. You are broke too. I was like, this could be it. You have to make a decision. And in that sobering moment, like all the alcohol was overwhelmed by adrenaline, I decided that I was going to do whatever it took to end my behavior. That's what you could describe as my rock bottom moment, Dr. Dan.
wow. I really appreciate you sharing this. That a lot of people would refrain from giving this information. So kudos to you for being who you are today, JK, and how you want to help others to be able to achieve the level that you achieve in terms of control, self-control, that is. Um, Now, what would be the best recommendation based on your own personal experience, especially those? I mean, you would agree with me that watching porn is a very solo experience, just like
Mm,
going weightlifting. You go on your own, you live, you go to the gym, you get it done, and then you go home.
mm,
So you don't have any judgment from the world that they look at you being addicted to porn. So
mhm.
there's no judgment, there's no fear that online everyone watch porn. I mean, at least a big majority. So no one really will find this taboo anymore as they did 20 years ago, as you mentioned before.
Yes.
So what would you tell people, or especially our listeners, um, on how to get started to distance yourself from this poison?
I want to get serious here for a moment,
Please.
Dr. Dan, because um, I've worked with everything from young men who are 18 years old all the way to individuals who are living in retirement homes. I've worked with everything in between. I've worked with business owners, executives, celebrities in 11 years of doing this. And I truly believe that pornography addiction is one of the most insidious compulsive behaviors out there for reasons you have mentioned. Because when you look all around you, we live in an increasingly sexualized world. It's almost okay to view these things, but I want you to think about one thing. If you've been trying to watch if you've been watching pornography and it's been having a negative impact on your life, you've been trying to stop, but you can't. Think of this one thing. Right now in 2023, any man who watches pornography has seen more naked people having sex than every single one of his ancestors that ever existed in our history. Think about that. Only this generation with high speed internet pornography. The human brain was not designed